Hello, everyone. This is part four of Mommy Dearest series, audio series. LOL. Anyway, so where I left off in the last video was pretty much when I was talking about me being in the library and two of my closest friends um, were there, and they kind of came up to me, and Jessica was the one who was kind of like who appeared to be the aggressor and was telling me that my birthday was coming up. I'm not really sure why she brought that up, but she felt the need to say it. And then Leslie was the one who was like kind of quiet. She looked kind of guilty, or she looked like she had something on her mind. And then next thing you know, I get approached by Bow Wow. Now, I didn't remember this at the time. This was one of the memories that kind of resurfaced. But Bow Wow approaches me and he says, he asked me to give him oral. And I told him no. Yes, Bow Wow, the celebrity, approached me and asked me to give him oral. I didn't know why he asked me that, but he just came up to me out of nowhere and just asked me that. I told him no. Then next thing you know, he and I are in the bathroom and one thing leads to another without my consent. Let's see. Another memory. This memory was um I would say this was shortly after I dropped out of college, and I started like working full time jobs, and I'm staying in a house with some roommates, and my brother Malik comes and stays with me and my roommates. Now, when he comes, he doesn't really ask me if it's okay for him to move in. He just kind of packed his bags and moved his stuff in. And he kind of took advantage of the fact that I was kind and, I wasn't going to have him out on the streets, but, he didn't really consider my feelings and ask me if it was okay for him to move in. Like, he didn't at all. He just moved his stuff in. So that was that. Um, so when he moved in, he was a jerk. And it was kind of unpleasant having him there because when he moved in, that's when all the drama started. That's when I started having fallouts with all my roommates there. And he was just there, and I felt like he didn't really contribute much. Um, so, what does this have to do with Mommy Dearest? Well, my mother was the one that was responsible for him moving in. My mother was the one who she organized and plotted that whole scheme to kind of steal from me and take me down using my brother. Anyway, so him moving in was just filled with chaos and drama. And, one thing led to another where he ended up making a pass at pretty much any girl that he knew that I liked. He would make a pass at her and, disrupt that entire connection via my mother's influence. Um, so one thing led to another, and um, I kicked him out. I made it clear that I didn't want him there anymore, and so he left to go stay with our mother. And shortly after I moved out of this house that I'm staying with roommates, he starts to become aggressive via my mother's influence. I don't know what she said to him. I don't know what she did to him. I don't know. Truly, I don't know. But you know how narcissists are when they triangulate two people against each other, or when they use divide and conquer tactics to dominate everybody in the environment so that they can throw everybody off their narcissistic scent. That was one of those situations where my mother was in the background plotting, scheming, and using my brother as the brute to enforce whatever agendas she had. So when I move out, I notice that my brother is like following me around like everywhere I go. Like everywhere I go, he's always popping up, he's always showing up. And, at this point, I had kind of made it clear that I didn't want to have a relationship with him because, in my opinion, I felt like, him, my mother, and other members of my family were negative influences on my life and the direction that I was going. And this was just a personal choice that I decided to make. Um, and this is actually before I knew anything about narcissism. So, I think I would say that my mother's lack of empathy and just causing chaos in my life kind of opened my eyes up to toxic people that were around me and the red flags that I wasn't really fully aware of. Once I cut my mother off, then in my opinion, my life started to become a little bit more clear. It started to become more clear, who was there to help and who was there to leech off of me and my success. And like I said, my mother being a covert narcissistic, a covert malignant narcissist, psychopath. I feel like I had to throw all of them in there at once. Um, was that catalyst to me realizing that the people that I had around me were no good for me, and the behaviors that I was displaying were detrimental to myself and self-destructive. So that was when I had to start making cuts around that time. And my brother was one of those people who I decided to cut out of my life along with my mother. I didn't realize that my sister was toxic. Well, not necessarily. I knew that my sister had flaws, and I knew that my sister had her ways, and she was kind of selfish. But it took me a little bit longer to realize that my sister was detrimental to my life as well. But my mother and my brother, it didn't take much for me to connect the dots with them because they were a little bit more vain and expressive in their narcissism. Even though my mother was covert to the world, she wasn't covert with me. It was clear that she didn't have empathy. It was clear that she didn't care. It was clear that she was abusing me. And as soon as I became of age, I moved out. Like that was just something that I needed to do. And my brother stayed, but that was because he had just gotten out of prison. Don't know what I for the longest period of time, I had been trying to figure out, why he went to jail. He never told me. And quite frankly, after a certain point of time, once I accepted that he wasn't going to tell me, I wasn't going to keep pressing him. But I felt like that was something I needed to know, considering that he was just moving his stuff in where I was staying. But this is part of the reason why I cut him off. So anyway, when I move out of the house filled with roommates that I associated with, I see him everywhere. Like he's following me everywhere I go, and I don't know why. Like, say if I go to the mall or I go grocery shopping or go to the movies, he's always there. and I have no idea why, following me around. And it's getting to the point where I'm starting to question my safety because I don't know what's going on. I don't know why he's following me around. And, the people that are in my life that I go to for advice and ask, like, hey, why is this dude following me? No one seems to have an answer. So there's that. Um, so, time passes and I do a little bit more healing and and I don't know. I guess I tried my best to get my life back in order and find my own place and just go on about life on my own. And this is during the time where I cut off my ex girlfriend. This was the time where I finally I made that last cut off and I'm cutting her off and I'm packing up my bags and moving out and um, because at first I tried to get her to move out, but that didn't work. So I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave because I'm done. Like I'm done with this. So I pack my stuff up and I leave, and I'm living on my own at this point. And I see my brother following me around everywhere, and my ex is blowing up my phone, and I don't really know what's going on. But at some point, I eventually cut them both off because my brother and her, had went behind my back. So I cut them both off. I'm on my own, but I see my brother everywhere I go. But my ex is blowing up my phone constantly. Just every day, she's blowing up my phone. So at some point, I block her number. I block all her numbers. I block all communication, all of, whatever social media accounts that I had her as a friend on. I block all of her all social media accounts. I block him as well, and I'm just moving on, with my life. And then next thing you know, I started noticing that, the apartment that I'm staying in is getting broken into. I noticed like little subtleties, like I'll see a key, a spare key on the counter, or I'll notice that when I'm coming home, the door's unlocked, or I'll notice that something's misplaced. Like, say if I put a bottle of water on the kitchen counter, well, that same bottle of water will be on the bathroom counter. Like somebody's like coming in and fucking with me. It seems like. And I just noticed these little subtleties. So I take notes. I start taking notes of, my brother following me around, popping up, my ex texting me. I start noticing just people from my past popping up, and I noticed like stalking. Because at this point, I'm gonna be 100% real. When I cut my mother off, I start cutting a lot of people off that I like when I started setting boundaries and the connections that I had, and I started calling people out on their toxic behavior, and we start having those adult conversations. And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect either, and I got called out too. But I guess from my perspective and from my side of the story, it felt like I was the only one willing to put forth the effort to make changes and to keep the connection going and keep it going strong. And it seemed like other people were willing to kind of just mooch off of me and my kindness and my hard work and my willingness to compromise and cooperate. And it seemed like I was I was always pulling, you know, the weight. I felt like trying to make a lot of these connections work was like kicking a dead horse, really. Dark analogy, but that's really what it felt like. And so I start cutting people off. And when I cut them off, I blocked them. Like it wasn't oh, I'm just gonna, take a break. And no, it was just, I'm gonna cut you off for good because I've made my point. I said what I had to say. You said what you had to say. And I, respectfully disagree with you, but I can't continue to be cool with you if you're not gonna respect my boundaries. It started off with my mother. And I just kind of noticed that when I cut my mother off, um, everybody else's behavior started to change. It's just something that I noticed. That's, why I'm connecting all this with my mother, because my mother was ultimately the ringleader of this. So, anyway, so I confront the people that I, consider, close friends, and I start noticing that my boundaries are not being respected and people are not taking me seriously. So I cut them off because I wasn't at that point. I wasn't playing about my future. I wasn't playing about my mental health. Because my health was deteriorating. I was sick. Like I'm still sick. I'm sick. So it's getting to the point where, you know, considering my condition, I'm not going to have people around me that are just going to make my situation worse. This is how I'm thinking. I'm thinking about myself at this point because my whole entire life, because of the way my mother raised me, I was always putting other people's needs before mine. It was always like that. I was forced to live like that. I was forced to be that way. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't mind doing things for people, out of the kindness of my heart. I don't mind helping. I don't mind giving love and being kind, genuinely kind. But I started noticing that via my mother's influence, people were taking advantage of me. And I wasn't having it anymore because I was getting sick. And I started noticing the lack of empathy, not just from my mother, but from the people around me. The people around me were being cruel, making fun of me, putting my insecurities on display, humiliating me, stealing money from me, just really taking advantage of my ailment and my situation. And that's a fucked up thing to do to somebody that's loyal to you. I was loyal to these people, including my mother, and they had nothing to show for but abuse. Abuse, power struggle, power plays, mind games. That was all they brought to the table. Misfortune, bad luck, bad karma, and I was taking up all of it. And so people had to go, including my mother. My mother was the main one that had to absolutely go. She had to go. And so when I cut my mother off, she pretty much put in a lot of effort to turn everybody against me, including my brother, my sister, my grandmother, everybody. But I mean, at the end of the day, everybody that I was close with, they were grown adults. They had a mind of their own, and they knew how my mother was and how she treated me. So they had a choice to make, me or my mother, and they chose. So at the end of the day, many people have come to me that had nothing to do with the falling out. A lot of, some people came to me, and I'm talking about the ones who respected my boundaries, the ones who I have a good standing with, came to me on their own and said, I've noticed that you've changed. I noticed that you've cut some people off, and what's going on? What's going on with you? And I don't, if somebody comes to me with respect, with some honor and some dignity, I tell them what's up. I don't mind telling people because if I feel like I did what I did was the right thing to do, I'm gonna be vocal about it, especially if somebody's asking me, "Hey, what's going on? What's wrong?" I mean, I'm here for you. I'm willing to listen. What's up? I don't mind telling them, and I have. So people will come and ask me, what's going on with you? You're not as active on social media. I've noticed that you've cut some people off. I've noticed that some people are mad at you because you're not talking to them no more. What's going on? And I told them the same thing I'm telling y'all on YouTube on this platform right here. I told people that came to me with respect and asked me what was going on. I told them because I had no problem doing that. I had no problem being honest and telling my side of the story. You ask, are you like, and most of the people who did ask me, I told them like, are you sure you're ready to hear this? Because it gets dark, it gets gloomy, it gets sad, it's depressing my side, But the only way that I can get through that dark cloud to the sun was to cut out that bad energy. I had to. So anyway, I told people who were asking me what was going on because some people were starting to get worried. Like, like I said before, people were coming to me and being like, what the heck is going on? Like, I'm starting to see people are angry at you. People are pissed off at you. People are following you around. People are giving you a hard time. Everywhere you go, it seems like you get bad luck. What the heck is going on? People start asking me. And at first, I didn't know. So I wasn't really, for the people who asked me originally and I didn't give an answer, it wasn't because I was trying to withhold information. It was because I didn't know, like, what the was going on. I didn't know myself. I didn't know. I did not know why everything was happening the way it was happening. I didn't know. I really didn't. I was trying to figure it out myself. Um, and then it got to the point where the people who did ask me at first when I didn't know started coming to me and they started like kind of like dropping little hints. And I can't really describe how they dropped hints, but a lot of them came to me and they with and said, what's up with you and your mom? Like, are you talking to her? Are you gonna keep talking to her? Like, did you cut her off? And if so, why? And a lot of the times people brought up my mom, and I didn't really know why because I mean, I thought I had made it clear as to why I cut her off. I mean, most of my friends had a known that were close to me, they had known why I cut her off. It was because she was intolerant of my quote unquote lifestyle. She was, homophobic towards me. Now, if whether she was truly homophobic or not, I'm not sure, but that's what she displayed towards me, a lack of support, despite, the homophobia that I faced outside of home. So I had to deal with people who, gave me hate for being gay, for being a lesbian woman. And then I had to deal with her, treating me differently because of that as well. And the lack of support from my family members for that as well. So I had pretty much gotten to that point where I was like, look, mom, no one's saying that you have to agree with me, but you're going to have to respect my lifestyle. And you're going to have to respect the fact that I'm not going to keep my sexuality a secret. She wasn't with it, so she had to go. I had to pack my bags and move out, and she had to go. It was just that was from this, and this is my side of the story because it was getting to the point where because she wasn't accepting of my lifestyle, because she wasn't okay with me coming out of the closet, and this is just not to this. I don't mean to say this to seem vain, but because of that, I no longer had respect for her authority. Because I mean, I was a good kid. I had been through enough, and if y'all have listened to my loud ass dog, if y'all the distractions, damn, I should make that a hashtag. Anyway, yeah. So if y'all listen to my other videos where I explain my mother's behavior in other situations where I needed her love and support the most, I'm pretty sure some of y'all could probably understand why at this point this was my boiling point. So, from my perspective, because, this was like the final straw for my mother, like in her behavior towards me, just on top of all the abuse and the human trafficking and just her being a hypocrite all around, that was my breaking point where I was like, you know what? It's time for me to not only move out, but slowly disconnect from her completely. Like, I had already had my mind made up that me and my mother's relationship was not going to last very long. I just knew it. And so, because I was thinking this way, I stopped having respect for her authority. I did. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to keep it real on that. I didn't have respect for her authority. I didn't listen to her. I stayed out late. Um, I really had this sense of entitlement because at this point, I had been such a good kid my entire life that I just felt like my mother was destroying my very being. You know what I mean? She was just destroying my spirit and like killing my soul. So I no longer had respect for her. And so I started to act out, not necessarily by just like being like overtly disrespectful, but staying out late at night, not coming home until early in the morning. Um, not going to class, skipping class, um, being late for work, because the abuse that my mother was putting me through was starting to affect my performance in other areas of my life. So I started distancing myself from my friends. And, this is nothing personal towards my friends, but, I was going through things, and because I chose to be around people that were very emotionally selfish, I didn't have that support. And so I just isolated myself from everyone because, they had already shown me that they weren't willing to be supportive emotionally and they didn't care about what I was going through. So I just decided to fall back. So fast forward to when I move out of my mom's house, I move out of my roommate's house, and I'm living by myself. This is the point in my life where things start to escalate and things start to get very dangerous for me. Because I've cut off a lot of people that I pretty much cut off everybody that I deemed disrespectful towards my boundaries and the new me. Because at this point, I had made my mind up that not only had I changed since changed from way back when, but I was going to continue to change. And when you have people that are in your life that known you ever since you were a baby, and they see that you've changed or that you're trying to change, some people don't necessarily support that. Some people don't see a benefit out of being around the new you or supporting the new you, whether it's because they feel threatened or envious, or even if they just don't like the new you. That's a lot of what I've had to go through. So, not pointing fingers, but a lot of fallouts may not have even had anything to do with just disrespecting my boundaries, but you know, me and um, my other friends, we just were growing apart, and we were growing in different directions. So I had to do what I had to do. I felt like it was necessary for me to do, which was cutting people off. So now we're at the part where I have my own apartment. I got my own job, and I'm trying to get my life back together on my own. So now that I'm starting to see that somebody is somehow breaking into my house or breaking into my apartment, um, I start taking notes of the gang stalking. This is during the time where I start to notice that I'm being stalked, but I don't know who it's coming from. The only people that I see actively is my brother popping up in places, and then my ex girlfriend texting me all the time. So that's the only thing that I know. But I see people from high school, people from other jobs that I worked at, people from college, randomly popping up in places that I go. And it's like very frequent to the point where it's clear that I'm being stalked by multiple people because no one's approaching me, but they're there all the time, right? Places that I would go all the time and I would never see these people. I all of a sudden see them when I'm starting to, be on my own and have my own life and my individuality. I start to see these people. Never saw them before, but I all of a sudden see them now. And I just thought it was strange. So I started taking notes. I just started taking notes just to make sure that, I'm not tripping and I don't just send an innocent person to jail, but that I'm actually noticing that I'm being stalked after I specifically made it clear with certain people that, no, it's a wrap. And them kind of just being blatantly disrespectful and just feeling like they can show up whenever they want to. So I started noticing this. People that I like made clear boundaries with turning into stalkers right before my eyes. And I feel like I got blindsided, but the reality of it is, whatever was going on behind the scenes, somebody was plotting on me, i.e., my mother. It all comes back to my mother. So I take notes and I take mental notes, but I'm also, you know, recording. Well, I'm not recording, but I'm taking I'm writing it down and I'm keeping a record of it because I know that some laws in certain states you can't just record people. You can't just take pictures, and sometimes in some states it's illegal. And I wasn't sure if in Texas or in Houston, Texas, whether or not it was legal or illegal to record people. I didn't know, so I just started writing things down first. And then it gets to the point where the people that are stalking me, that were acquaintances or friends from the past, their behavior starts to get more aggressive. I don't know why. Till this day, I don't know why their behavior became more and more and more aggressive. I don't know. But I start noticing, yeah, their behavior becoming more aggressive. I start to see them more frequently. Um, like, for example, I'll be walking in the store, and at first, when they first started stalking me, say I'll be on one end of the store, they'll be on the other end of the store. But as their behavior starts to become more aggressive and aggressive and aggressive, they start to feel more comfortable standing closer and closer to me. And I didn't know, why they were doing that. I still to this day, I don't know why they were doing that. But I start noticing that, they start standing closer towards me. They start being a little bit more obvious when they're following. As at first they would just pop up at the store and maybe even leave or be on the other side of the store, far away from me. But then I started noticing them following me around the store, and I didn't know why. I didn't know why they were like following me damn near everywhere I went, and walking all up on me so closely. And it's like, if you have something to say, why don't you, if you're going out of your way to stalk me, and make your presence known, why don't you just say what you have to say so that we can move on from this? That's what I'm thinking. And I don't approach them or say anything to them because I had already said what I had to say. So I mean, at least as far as my end, the conversation was done. Now, if they had anything else to say, they had that opportunity when I established the boundary. And everybody that I cut off, I asked, is there anything else that you have to say? Is there any questions, concerns? And they just left me on red as like some type of power play. And when I seen that they read my message and no response, block. Because, you know, as adults, we know when somebody is um, really serious about, being mature about a situation or a disagreement, and when someone's playing mind games. And I guess with me, there were some people who said what they had to say, and I made sure that, they said everything they had to say. And for the most part, most of the people that I, cut ties with, we both had our fair exchange, and we respected each other's decision, and we just went the opposite direction. But there were some people who kind of went out of their way to, how can I explain it? Avoid me, make me feel like I didn't exist, make me feel small. You know how people do when they in their player mode. They act like, oh, it's not that big a deal, or they leave you on red, or say for instance, like, you'll message them something, and then next thing you know, like, you'll see them post like 15 minutes later. Those type of games. So when I started seeing that, I gave them about a week or two. Some people I gave a week, some people I gave two, depending on my connection with them. And then block, because I'm not going to wait more than a certain amount of time for you to respond if you're stringing me along or leaving me on red or playing mind games, because I didn't at that point I didn't have time for that. So I was like, okay, well, in my head I'm thinking I'll give this person a week, or because I've known this person ever since I was a small kid, I'll give this person 2 weeks to respond. And if I don't get anything, then I'll assume that that's their response, is leaving me on red, is that's their way of confirming that they acknowledge what I said, right? I mean, this is what I'm thinking, because I'm not the type of person that likes to play games. If I need a minute to respond, I'll just say, hey, the information that you're presenting, it's a lot to take in. Give me a week or two to respond and get my thoughts together. That's how adults handle the situation, right? If somebody's coming at you like, a excuse me, I know that we've been cool for quite some time, but I feel like you're not respecting my boundaries. As a mature adult, I'm pretty sure your response would be, well, dang, you coming at me a little bit heavy, but can we talk about this? Can we do this and that and that? And like I said, a very few people responded in that way. Some people I've met up with face to face, and we talked about it, and we agreed that it was best that we go our separate ways. And then there were some people who, you know, the agreement got a little emotional, but
We came to a mutual respect and understanding. Even if there was we agreed to disagree if, there was a disagreement. But there were some people who chose to play mind games as a power play. Now, I don't joke around with people like that, because that's very toxic. So I'm not going to just say a person is a narcissist because they choose to act like that. It's just it shows me either you have a toxic way of communicating or you're emotionally immature, and I'm not going to feed into it regardless. A person does not have to be a narcissist to get cut off. I don't play those type of games. You either respond like a mature adult or you're getting blocked. I don't have time for mind games. So how did I respond? Blocketh. That was how I responded. And so I started noticing that the people who chose to play mind games started teaming up with my mother. I started noticing that when I would, like I said, like say if I was at the grocery store or the movie theater or the mall, my mother would be there with some of the people that I cut off, and they would just be following me around the store, following me around wherever, trolling me, making slick comments. And because they didn't come to me correct, I didn't entertain it. Because the reality of the situation is, I'm not going to play games. I made that clear when I blocked them. They got the message. So instead of respecting the message, they teamed up with my mother, which was somebody that they knew I was not on good terms with, and turned on me. So how's my mother? How's my mother? What does my mother have to do with any of this? I wondered that for a while. I wondered that myself. What does my mother have to do with my friends? What does my mother have to do with the gang stalking? What does my mother have to do with the financial abuse that I faced? I asked those same type of questions. Why would my mother do something like that? How could my mother be capable of doing something like that? I don't know. I mean, I didn't have the answer at the time. Um, like I said, people came to me and they asked me what was going on, why so many people were attacking me, and the first response that I gave was maybe I said something or I did. Because I'm gonna be honest, when I first started kind of cutting people off, I didn't think that I was gonna get the reaction that I got. To be honest with you, because things were going so smoothly at first. Because at first, a lot of people were respecting the fact that I established those boundaries, and they cooperated. Real deal facts. And then it started to become worse when I started expressing my views on, the nutritional diet, or I started expressing my spiritual views on life, or I started expressing the fact that I'm a black revolutionary, I'm a black truther, and anybody that is non-black that's going to be in my life is going to have to respect that I'm proud of my African heritage. So when I started making that clear, um, I started noticing a drastic shift in people's behavior towards me. And, it is what it is, but I made it clear who I was, and it was a test of people's character to see who was really my friend and who really wasn't. Because I was no longer going to pretend to be this people pleasing, like, pushover anymore. Like, that was never who I was to begin with, and it wasn't someone that I was going to become either. So, um, yeah, that is the only answer that I could really come up with as to why people started turning on me in such large numbers. And of course, given that my mother is a narcissist, psychopath, she has been behind the scenes forming alliances with people who didn't really like me all that much and put on a good front. She had been kind of grooming these people to become enemies of mine at some point. And I thought it was kind of strange how, close my mother was with some of my friends. But after a certain amount of time, I put two and two together, and it started to become clear that this is the triangulation slash isolation slash devalue. Like that was just, it seemed like that was what it was. So that was, I mean, that was a conclusion that I came up with. That was a conclusion that I came up with after a certain amount of time. So my mother did not take it very well when she started noticing me distancing myself from her. So, how did she respond? She started showing up at my job, causing a scene. She started following me to work, showing up at my house, reaching out to my friends, reaching out to family members to, play the victim. And she started offering help in the areas where if she had offered that type of help sooner in my life, we probably wouldn't be estranged now. But I mean, at this point, I was done with my mother. To be honest with you, I was done, and there was no way that she could, come back from that. So there's another story that I want to share with y'all. I'm backtracking to when I was 10 years old because I completely forgot about this story. But I was 10 years old. Oh, no, no, no. I was 11 years old. I was 11 years old. And I'm at, my mom's high school friend's house. Now, my mother, she has a lot of high school friends that she knew since, Chicago days. And because my family has deep roots in Chicago, Illinois, um, there's just a community out there, one big family, and a lot of us are connected to each other. So my mother went to high school in Chicago, and she has a lot of childhood friends that became adulthood friends. And so one of them, one of my mother's high school friends, her name is Tammy. She had two sons. One son was named Darion. He was 2 years older than me. And then the other son was named Steve, and he was a year older than me. And we were like family. Like a lot of my mother's high school friends had kids, and we became like this big, big family. So anyway, we were like family, and they were brother. We called each other brother and sister. Like they were, like one of my mother's many um, god family, I guess. Like Tammy was our godmother, and her sons were our godbrothers, and I had many godbrothers and sisters just in case my mother passed, and she had somebody else had to step in and take care of us. It was, we had many options, so they were like family. And I remember them moving from Chicago to Wisconsin with us, and they stayed with us. They stayed with us for a little while. I think that they stayed with us for about maybe a year or two. It was a little while, but they stayed with us, and they were like family. And I just remember specifically when they moved out and they got a house. Um, we used to go over there a lot. When they got a house in Wisconsin, like we used to go over there and play football, play basketball, run around the neighborhood. Like we used to have fun. And um, I remember um, Tammy's boyfriend, which is, the baby daddy in the situation. Now his name is Steve Senior. So the youngest son is Steve Junior. The Steve Senior is the father of Steve Junior,